All right, guys, welcome to the Independent Investor Channel. I have a very special guest this evening, Mr. David Oldenburg, with us to talk about real estate. We're going to change up the theme on the channel a little bit and talk about the other of the two most important investments that you could ever make in your life. I'll give David the floor to do a quick introduction as well. Welcome, everybody, and give a few moments for the folks to make their way into the discussion tonight. David, go ahead.
Hey, Ryan, I want to thank you for having me on. I love watching your Friday night live streams, and it was great being a guest, about a month ago on your program. For those of you, if you want to reach out to me, I'll just give these really quick. Two places where you can find me. One is my YouTube channel, which is flippingacademy.com. Second is my podcast, which is at davidoldenburg.com, and it's just like it shows, I guess, spelled somewhere in here. So anyway, that's it, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, very good. And thank you again for taking the time. David, you've got a wealth of knowledge in this field. And I tell you, a lot of the knowledge that I've gained in real estate over the years, I've owned 2 homes in my time. I have been a landlord. What makes it very difficult for me is moving around and always having to assess the market on about a 5-year scale. So very challenging to engage in this discussion between us two. Your expertise goes into the lending side of the house as well as the home flipping as well, right, David?
Right.
You want to speak a little bit more specifically about where your expertise comes from, and then we'll kind of get into some of the topics that we have for this evening.
I'll try to keep this short, man. I have a big resume when it comes to real estate. 1989, I came into the real estate industry as a lender. I was a lender, worked as a lender till 1994. I was a top producer in the mortgage lending world, doing FHA, VA, conventional. In 1994, I got my real estate broker's license here in California. I formed my own mortgage company at that point. 2 years later, I formed my own real estate company. During that time, I was hosting a big, successful radio show talking about real estate. Ended up launching a bigger mortgage company in 2000, built that to 50 employees. Making multiple millions of dollars, built the real estate company. At that point, started getting more into real estate investing. Since then, I've launched a real estate investing group. I now have 2,000 members in that. And I teach people every day, basically for free, how to invest and how to grow their wealth and their business in real estate. Or to complement what you do, Ryan, I teach people how to use real estate as another investment tool along with their stock market or their mutual fund or retirement type investing.
Absolutely. And I think for the real takeaway for the folks that are just joining us tonight on the live stream, I think at the end of this, you're going to be much more the wiser in answering a couple questions. Should I buy a home now? Should I be looking to save some capital to eventually buy a home? And once you're in a home, what can I do to maybe maximize my opportunity if I am a homeowner? Do you want to touch on some of that, David?
Yeah, and I also like to add, if we have time, I wrote down so many different things that I wanted to talk about. I know a lot of people get really excited about talking flipping too. I'm kind of an expert house flipper and trainer in that area, and so I have all kinds of neat ways, and things you can do to buy flips and do work for cheap and make lots of ROI on flips. And so if we have time and want to get into that end of it, I would love to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, home flipping has been one of those things I was really interested in it about 10 years ago. And I know you could probably talk about how that market has evolved over time. I've spoke with a few flippers, you being one of them, but I've talked to others as well, Dave, to where it's become a little bit more specific. You've got to really know what you're doing. It's maybe not as Wild West as maybe it used to be, a little more cavalier back in the day. And, a lot of people know that people are out there doing some home flipping activity and making some profit. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're absolutely right. When I first got into the industry, the word flipping hadn't even been invented.
That's right.
Basically, you were just, if you bought properties, fixed them up, rented them out, and sold them, you were just a real estate investor, period. And it was like that through all of the 90s, basically, and really through most of the early 2000s. And then we had HGTV come out, and they started coming out and all these flip or flop type shows, and everybody started calling it flipping. Now it was called flipping a little before that, but it really got the launch at that point. And we went through a period I saw from about 2009 on, where kind of everybody wanted to be a house flipper, and people were getting great deals during that time because of the Great Recession. They were buying at the courthouse steps here in Sacramento and other areas, and it was pretty easy money. It was that low hanging fruit where you would go out, buy a property, you had a big margin, it was hard to make a mistake, everybody was making lots of money, and everybody became an expert. And it's just not that market anymore. The market we're in now, I think, to be a good flipper, to generate enough deals and make enough profit and ROI, you have to kind of know what you're doing. You have to have capital behind you, and you have to be able to strategize. As I say, I don't teach people how to flip. I teach people how to build a flipping business. Well, and to me, that's a bigger deal.
I just want to add to that, David. Are you saying that you need to be an expert in all fields? Because I could say that there may be flippers out there that are very good at identifying property,
Yes.
but they don't have the capital. Maybe they identify that capital and it needs some work. You should have access to some people who are handy and can come in there and do the work quickly, so you're not having to carry the contract. So would it help to have a support structure, or are you saying that you need to be a jack of all trades, have cash ready to go, pull up, 14, 21 days and you're out?
There are different components that it helps to be good at if you're flipping. Yeah. And of course, I'm not going to lie, it helps to have a lot of money. Or if you I'm seeing you laughing there. If you don't have a lot of money, it's kind of like investing in the stock market. If you have a lot of money, it's easier to make money. Sure. But yet you can invest in the stock market with a couple $100. And so what I would say is this: if you don't have a lot of money, you either need to have access to capital quickly from hard money lenders or private lenders, or you need to have relationships, which is what I recommend, with people like me, people that can step in on a moment's notice and put up $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 in 24 to 48 hours and do a cash buy on a deal that is too good to be true. So you don't necessarily have to have capital, and you don't have to have the experience that you mentioned as far as being a jack of all trades, as far as being able to do the work. You can always get other people to do the work for you.
You seem like a very, very trustworthy guy. I know that you are, but for those folks out there that would come to you and say, David, I need X number of dollars, how would you go to establish that line of trust when you're talking about that much money? And how much rapport do you need before you feel comfortable doing that? And do you try to keep the client base on a selective basis, or is it just an open market? How on that?
Well, that's a great question. Most private money lenders, and I do a combination. So I don't just go out there and loan money all the time. I actually prefer to partner with people most of the time. But some people will call me. A perfect example: about 3 hours ago, I was on the phone with a couple of contractors, and they said to me, we find these houses and we can buy them at a great deal and we can do the work, but we just don't have any capital. And so I brought up several options with them, one where I could loan them money, one where I could actually partner with them and help them project manage the flips. And, and we talked about those different scenarios. Yes, I have to have a little bit of rapport with you before I'm going to bring a $400,000 check into title, to buy a house for you. But keep in mind, even if I do that, I have a lot of protection. I'm going to put a first mortgage on the property, which means that I have the power to foreclose. Yep. I'm also, there's protective equity, because on a flip, let's say you're buying it for 300, you're going to do 25 or 30,000 in work, and then you're going to sell it for, say, 400. Well, if you're borrowing 300, even if I'm doing a 90% loan for you, I'm only loaning you 270,000 on a property that's going to be worth 400. And so even if you don't do the work, even if you flake out completely, here in California, within 4 months, I can foreclose and take the property back. I can do the work myself, and I can sell the property and I can make that money.
I just think peer-to-peer lending is becoming more and more popular, David. And I think just connecting the network between potential home investors and folks like yourself. I don't want to
Right.
speak for you, David, but I would think that the money aspect would be kind of the easy part, but the framework of the deal, having the expertise to look at a deal and say, yeah, I don't know if this seems reasonable. I've heard you mention that you typically have a threshold or a bottom end that you typically wouldn't go under. In other words, some deals you can kind of look at and say, this might not be worth our time. We might be looking to stretch. Is that correct?
Well, let me just say this. The flipping world works very fast. It's a very fast-paced world. And what I mean by that is the deal and negotiation part. The average amount of time that I spend inside of a home to make the decision to buy is about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. Not weeks, hours, days.
Yeah.
Usually I'm made aware of a deal. Somebody is maybe in foreclosure. Maybe somebody is facing probate. There's something going on and they need me to come in and do a quick buy on the home. I will crunch the numbers over the phone. I will look at MLS and Zillow, the two of those, and we can talk about that in a minute. But I will look at those to determine what I believe the value is roughly. And then I will have to go out to the property, estimate my rehab in 15 minutes, and then sit down in front of the seller and do a one-on-one, face-to-face negotiation with them and try to ink that deal within less than 45 minutes.
So I think the person that you're lending or the person that you would look to go into business with would also take some comfort in knowing that you, in fact, are protected. But I also heard you say, a couple months ago or a month ago that you haven't had, if any, deals go bad, go south on you. And for the number of deals, I was surprised. I really raised an eyebrow when you said that. And I thought that's really interesting that you had one that was close.
A couple of things. And yes, that is correct. Knock on simulated vinyl that I have in front of me. In the 30 years that I have been doing this, that I've been buying properties, selling properties, doing investing, I have never, ever, ever lost money on a single deal. Now, I have had deals that I didn't make as much money as I thought I was going to. As an example, 5 years ago, I had a deal that went really south. And I hooked up and partnered with some people that did some unethical things during the deal that I was unaware of, and I had to deal with attorneys and everything, but I salvaged the deal. I was able to make everybody happy. I was able to sell the property. I was able to keep everybody out of court, and I still put $7,000 profit in my pocket. Now, I thought I was going to make about 50 grand on that deal, and I made 7, but I still didn't lose any money. Other than that one, every other deal has gone pretty good. I will also say in 30 years of working with the general public, doing thousands and thousands of real estate transactions as either a lender or a realtor or an investor partnership, I have only been sued one time. And the one time I was sued was 14 years ago, and I won. It was thrown out as a frivolous lawsuit. So I have never had a legal attachment against me.
Incredible. Now, you're based in California, David. Do you ever feel like you miss out in some other pocket markets, or are you very satisfied with knowing that niche market there in California? You probably know every street corner, every pocket neighborhood. Knowledge is everything, but
Is it possible, because I would love to tie this in, there was a woman who had a question earlier that you popped up. Do we have the ability to pop her question up?
This is all good. She's in the community. She's one of the loyal followers of our message, and you can take it, Dave.
Well, I saw her last night on the live stream, so all good. Hi. So her question kind of goes right into what you just asked me, Ryan. The question: which state is the best to invest in rental properties in the current economic situation? Well, here's the thing. The answer to that question is the same regardless of the economic situation that we're in. And I'm going to answer it with, I'm going to give a kind of a several answers to the question. But the first thing I would say is always invest in an area that you know if you can. Okay. So the best area is the area that's close to you. Now, that doesn't mean it's the best ROI.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's the cheapest. It doesn't mean that, that everything's going to work out perfect. It just means that when you're investing, whether it's rental properties or, or a second home, it's always nice to be able to get in your car and drive over to that property and knock on the door, or, give 24 hours notice and kind of find out what's going on. In my early days of rental properties, I had some nightmare stories, and it was from not checking on the properties. Now, if you're flipping, and you're saying investing in rental property, so I'm going to assume you're not flipping, that you're wanting to buy and hold for an extended period of time. For that reason, again, when you can keep an eye on a property, that is by far the best. Now, let's say you're in San Francisco right now, and you can't afford to buy a $3 million rental property and rent it out, okay? Obviously, I'm going to say go outside of your area. But I'm in Sacramento, and even though in my neck of the woods, average home prices are probably $600,000 to $900,000 where I live, not too far away from me, maybe going 15 miles into Sacramento, you can pick up houses at $250,000. You can pick up rental properties at $250,000, $275,000. With the current interest rates, you can actually buy those properties, especially with a 10 or 15% down payment. You can buy those properties for a smaller payment than what you can get in rent. And I see that in many other states as well. So I hope I kind of answered that question. You want to invest local if you can. If you can't, go elsewhere, but try to stay as close as you can. Like, people out here will go, well, I can't find a good deal in California, so I'm going to North Carolina. And that to me is just absurd. It's like, why go 3,000 miles away when there are areas of California where you can buy properties darn near the same price as North Carolina?
Yeah.
So go as little distance as possible.
Very good. I really appreciate that. I was listening intently because I wanted to ask that same question. I've got some really interesting ideas about that, but we'll leave it for another day, David.
All right.
For the new home buyer that does never owned, looking to be a first time buyer, I think for a lot of people, at least I'm speaking from experience, how intimidating buying that first home was, and it really felt like it was a leap of faith.
Yes.
So my question to you is, what is the best way for new home buyers to enter into the home market? And if that's too open-ended, I can certainly specify, but I think for a lot of new home investors, how do you break the ice?
Okay. And you're right. I could talk for an hour on that topic, so I'll try to keep it short. First off, it is challenging. I bought my first house when I was 19 years old, making minimum wage. We can talk about that in a little bit. I did a podcast on it the other day. Let me say this. There's a couple of things that I think millennials especially, and the Generation Zers, the people that are maybe 20 to 24 right now, millennials maybe pushing up to 40, they only have an ownership interest of about 33%. So only about a third of you are buying houses or own, and that's a really low number compared to, some of the older generation Xers like me and some of the baby boomers. Yep. And I think part of that is that you don't really understand all the process and the way and what you need to do. Credit is paramount. So if you don't have good credit right now, you want to start working on it. And there's I'm kind of like a credit repair expert because I did that in lending for all my clients for 25 years. But I don't want to talk a lot about that because there's probably 10,000 YouTube videos on how to make your credit score higher or what to do. Yeah. By all means, outside of this live stream, if somebody wants to reach out to me, I'm willing to help in that area. But credit is important. House hacking. Now, Ryan, you and I talked in kind of backstage a little bit about house hacking. Yep. If I were under 30 right now, and especially if I were single or I had a really understanding girlfriend, I would do house hacking. House hacking is basically buying a property, or you can house hack like an Airbnb style, but I'm going to stick with buying. So you buy a property. Let's say your payment on that property is $2,000 a month out here in California with low interest rates. And you're like, wow, that's a big payment. But you're able to squeak by on the qualifying and make it work. Well, let's say you get a 3-bedroom. You would live in 1 bedroom and rent out the other 2. Now, in my area, a 1-bedroom inside of a house is about $800 a month each, easy, which means that you could get $1,600 a month from your roommates out of your $2,000 a month payment. And because you're doing an amortized loan, you're paying about $400 to $500 every month of your payment is going to principal reduction, meaning your effective payment is 0.
Yes.
And you can buy a house like that all day long. Now, maybe you can't afford a $2,000 a month payment. Fine. Buy a $1,500 a month payment house and get a couple roommates. Or maybe your area, you can't get $800 for rent. Maybe you can only get roommates to pay $500. Well, get that house that has a payment of $1,500, get 2 roommates at $500. That's $1,000. You're buying a house for $500 a month. So house hacking is what I would do because it's the cheapest, fastest, easiest. And let's say you can't qualify on your own. Well, take somebody you trust, a really good friend or a family member, brother, sister, and buy that house with them and maybe rent out that one other room, so you can do dual qualifying. There's lots of options. I mean, you should be buying if you can.
I know your philosophy on that. I tell you what, and I'm one of those rare birds that I'm probably more careful than I need to be. This was the toughest deliberation we went through, and we opted not to buy here, David. Just with the amount of traveling that we do and being uprooted every 5 years maximum, and to get in and get out in the real estate game. Just as a single family, not as an investment per se, but to live in the home and hope to get a little appreciation in 5 years is pretty tight. We've been pretty lucky for the 2 that we have. But for those folks out there listening that do have the luxury of, maybe having a job that's very, very localized, and they've got that ability to start and scale into the market, I think that would be my biggest advice, is to not overbuy. I think so many people, they want that dream, and you don't always need to do that. I think if you start with more of an entry-level property, maybe even with a little bit of elbow grease that's necessary, you can maybe manufacture some of that capital and some of that equity in that property, even at $150,000 or a $200,000 price point, maybe an entry-level price point.
One thing that's because of what you're talking about, now's a good time I was kind of saving it for later, but I have something I'd love to interject here because I think it's something that I'm going to guess probably none of the people that are watching this or will watch this in the future have either ever thought of this, or if they have thought about it, they just didn't really know how to implement it. As everybody knows, one of the biggest challenges that homeowners, especially younger, newer homeowners, are facing right now, the market's tight. Inventory in a lot of areas is low. Yep. Interest rates are low, and there's demand to buy. We can talk in a minute about whether I think that's going to continue. But right now, it's hard to get in. And what I'm always hearing, and I've been hearing for years in this kind of market, is, I went out to my lender, I'm working with a realtor, I got approved, but every single time I go to make an offer, I get outbid. Yeah. Or somebody comes in with cash and they make an offer, and even though the offer might be a little bit lower than mine or lower, the seller takes it because they don't have to mess around with FHA and VA and conventional for 45 days and then worry about the deal falling out. And so let me tell you, there is a solution, and I have been that solution multiple times. Not even that long ago, this happened to me. And I'll tell you the way it works. You come to an investor like me that has money, and you say, I want to be able to pay cash for a house. I want to be able to negotiate it, and I want to be able to offer low and get a really good deal. And I want to be able to close that in 3, 4, 5 days. Well, people like me are used to loaning money at high interest rates. So like the average that I loan money for is 10% interest, the flippers. and I get 2 to 3 points. So it's expensive money. Like you wouldn't want to borrow that money for an extended, like, 3, 4, 5 years. But in the short term, like a month or 2 or 3, it's not bad at all, especially if it saves you a lot of money. And so what I've done for people is I've said, hey, once we work out the details, I'll say, hey, you go ahead and go out there and find the property you want. When you find it, I will go in, negotiate the deal. I will buy that property for myself, cash in days. I will turn around and immediately resell it to you, where you can do your loan and everything else, and you can buy the property from me. And I will obviously put some kind of margin in there, a profit for myself. Yes. But on that resell, we don't have a lot of expenses. We don't have real estate commissions or repairs or really anything else. It's just me buying the property and selling it to them. The other thing I can do, and this is where it really sweetens the pot. Let's say you want to buy a really awesome property, but it needs some work and it won't go Fannie Mae or FHA. Yeah. Guess what? I can buy that property. I can use my own cash, and in probably 2 to 3 weeks, do almost anything that needs to be done to that property to make it the way you want it, and then turn around and sell it to you at a pre-agreed upon price. Wow. So you probably haven't heard of investors doing that, but I do those kinds of things all the time.
I've never heard of that. And I would say this market now, and we've got realtors that are just really, really, they're juicing that right now. You come to the table and it's like, no, you've got to go 10,000 over ask right now. Otherwise you're going to get outbid. And I just want to sit back and say, well, hold on a second. I'm not bartering for something on the street here. I'm not buying a car. I'm buying a home. What the heck is this? Right. And it still is one of those few things that we do, in fact, barter for. We do. We have the opportunity to go in and offer a price and come to an agreed upon sales price. But I never, ever thought about that, using someone in that capacity now to become basically more competitive. Yes, probably get a better deal. Because competing now, right, Dave, my story and my profession, right? I'm dealing with the VA. And one of the big drawbacks that I always deal with is the inspection for the VA.
It's difficult.
It is difficult. And it's, the other realtors telling the seller, hey, here's 2 cash offers. We've got an FHA and a VA on the table. I'm going to fall to the 4th tier priority in that racking. I'm not going to be competitive.
One thing I want to say, that I want to take this question. Do I have the ability to throw a question on, or do you have to do it?
Wait, who is it?
Brian Scott.
Yep, just got under contract. Is that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so first off, I want to, and I'm kind of drawing a blank here. I got sidetracked on looking at his question. You were talking about the
VA inspection and not being competitive with using.
Oh, okay, yes. So that's a great point, and here's why. If I buy the property for you, I'm negotiating it and I'm paying cash for it with my own money. You need to understand that 30 years of negotiating thousands of homes, and the average house that I negotiate and buy is 100 to 150,000 under market. I'm an expert negotiator. I'm always going to get a better deal than you will. Meaning that I'll go in there and negotiate a phenomenal deal. And half the times they'll just give me that phenomenal deal because they know I have the cash. They know I have the track record. They know I can close that deal in 48 to 72 hours with no repairs, no nothing, and just get it done. And sellers love that. They fall over themselves to sell me houses. And so if I'm going to the table and negotiating your deal for you with my own capital, I'm going to get a great deal. Now, knowing that, let's skip over to Brian's question because it's a great question. He says, just got under contract with a co-borrower. Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. That's a great question. But the one I wanted was Brian Scott, where it says, David, wouldn't you just do a lease option?
Okay.
Do you see that one? Okay. So sorry, Brian, I saw your other question too, but this is the one I want to answer right now. Brian says, well, why would you just buy them the property? If you're going to buy it for yourself, make it your own investment, sell it to them as a lease option. And Brian, that's a great question. That's a great strategy. as well. But understand the way I make my money with what I do is that if you kind of have gathered already, I'm churning my money constantly. So I'm getting into a flip, getting out in 2 to 3 weeks, like a wholesale or fast flip. I'm loaning money to a flipper and getting out in 30 to 60 days. Everything that I'm doing is high ROI and very short term. So I don't want to do a lease option and become, the landlord, if you will, or the investor. Because although I might make a couple of extra bucks by holding that property for a year, I can take that capital and go out and do 2 or 3 more flips and make another 100 grand with that money. I don't want to, waste my time with making an extra couple $1,000s a month in rent.
Yeah.
And so, great question. Hopefully that made sense and you understand why I don't do that.
I just think the art of the negotiation, I think it's a high income skill that we don't talk about enough, David. So I really appreciate you being open with that. I think that's incredible. I don't know how happy the realtors are. Maybe they are happy to deal with another professional, but if they've got their client's best interest in mind to sell at the top dollar, how does it benefit for you to step in and do a quick close? You mentioned quickly that cash really is attractive to most sellers. I wouldn't be one of them. I would want top dollar. And if I've got to wait 45 days, I'll wait. So I was interested in that.
That's a great point, Ryan. You're right. Probably 95% of the sellers think just like you. They have a dollar figure that they want to get for their house, and let's face it, they should get that money. I mean, if you have a house that's worth $400,000, there's no reason why you should sell me that house for 300. Hire a realtor, get top dollar. Most of the deals that I buy are deals where there is an extenuating circumstance. Either the property needs some work, or there's something about it that needs to be done, or the seller has a very specific reason they need to sell. One that I negotiated just the other day was somebody who is coming upon a trustee sale. They're literally losing their house to foreclosure. They only have 7 or 8 days left before they lose their house. Right. And if it goes to auction, they're going to lose almost all of their equity. And so I stepped in and put the capital up to stop the foreclosure and to pay everything off. And I'm making a cut of what this house sells for, but I also, stopped the foreclosure and made it work. So let's take that into terms that will help the people that are watching this live stream. Let's say you came to an investor like me and said, I found a house that I really want to buy, but the guy's going to lose it to foreclosure, and I don't have the money to buy it at the auction. Like I don't have, 250 or 300,000 cash. I could actually buy that property for you before it goes to auction. In other words, I can stop the foreclosure, and I can do that all the way up until the day of the auction.
Oh, I'm blown away. I really am blown away. There's other folks out there in the world, David, that have the capacity to do what it is that you do. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why more people don't engage in this. Am I just naive to this? And this is going on? Is this the way it works? Talk to me.
No,
incredible.
No. Most investors that I know, and I know a lot of investors. I mean, I speak in live events on stage. I have a 2,000 member real estate investing group. I mean, I live, eat, and breathe teaching people how to make money in real estate. And so I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of real estate investors. I'm one of the only investors that I know who does this kind of thing. I don't know why they don't. I think they would just rather flip, rather just buy properties for themselves. And I do that, and I love doing that. But sometimes there are situations where I can help, and selfishly I can help and profit, and so I will do that. I can't mention his name because I don't want to.
Of course.
But just a couple days ago, it was very rewarding. A friend of mine was losing his house to foreclosure and had some equity, and he was trying to sell it, and he had a buyer. And the buyer backed out at the last minute, and he came to me desperate. And in about 24 hours, I put the money together, stopped the foreclosure, saved his house, saved all the equity. I'm going to be making a few dollars on that myself,
Sure.
but I saved him about $85,000 in equity.
You saved an
Um,
awful big dent in the credit and all the damage that's
yeah,
incurred by going into foreclosure, David.
yeah. So, and you know, and I'm saying this on a live stream on YouTube. So the challenge here is that I do almost all the investing in things that I do in my local area. So, you know, if you're in Texas right now and you're watching this, or you're watching it down the road and you're thinking, man, that's my situation. I'm in foreclosure. I want some investor to stop it. Or I've got a house that needs some work and I want to flip my own house. And we can talk about that in a minute. That's an awesome strategy, flipping your own house. And you're thinking, man, I'd love to call David. I only loan the money and I only do those kinds of things in the Northern California area where I live. But you can take the idea and go out and try to find somebody that would do that for you.
There's two schools of thought here, David, and I'm just incredibly encouraged by what you're talking about. It sounds to me like what you're saying is there are opportunities out there unlimited. Okay, now let me give you my perspective.
Yes.
I scour over the landscape daily. I'm a real estate nerd, just like I'm a stock market nerd, and I'm constantly monitoring what comes available, what's out there, and I can tell you that those opportunities are super lean. Where the heck do you find these? And I think I speak for a lot of people who are like, ask him, Ryan, ask him, because it sounds like to me that the opportunities out there are prevalent. And there are people that get into trouble. They do get in over their head, sometimes not by their own problems. Sometimes things happen and life happens and people end up in a poor situation,
I'll answer that question right now, but when I'm done, can we bring up Matt Money and his question at 5:25 p.m. where he says, I might move to houses?
Yep.
Okay. So the question you're asking, and this is a very common question, actually, Ryan, it's probably the number one question that I get. And that is, how do you find these deals? Like, I'm out there trying, and this is what I'm not using my words, I'm using somebody else. Will come to me and say, hey, Dave, I'm out there, scouring Zillow and driving neighborhoods and talking to every realtor I know. And man, every house I find, the only way I can buy it is I have to pay over market.
Yeah.
It's like there's no good deals out there. Here's the thing. I find these deals because I have a network of people that help me find these deals. Earlier you said, I think you kind of worded it kind of like, I wonder if realtors, want to work with you or if they would. Realtors love me.
Yeah.
I overpay realtors in almost every situation. I am a licensed realtor and broker myself. So when I cut a deal, the one thing I didn't mention earlier is that when I cut a deal, if there is a realtor involved, I make sure they're paid. I don't cut people out of deals. I don't step on toes. I don't go behind people's backs. I don't do anything unethical. I make sure that everybody involved is happy. That's how I've had 30 years of never having to go to court. Yep. It's doing things the right way. So a lot of my deals come to me from realtors because I will go out to realtors and I will say to them, when you come across that hoarder house or that fixer house or that desperate seller or somebody that's in foreclosure, call me immediately. I'm guessing that if you are looking for houses, you're not telling your realtor to bring you those deals. You're saying to the realtor, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I want it to be nice. Yeah. I want it, I want this. I want it to be turnkey. You're not going to the realtor and saying, hey, bring me your crap and see where I am.
Yeah, my wife is overhearing you, Dave, during the live stream, and we're talking here. It's just incredible. Most people want to walk through the front door of a house, David. They don't want to go through the back door. And I think what you're defining is that there is, in fact, a back door. because you're absolutely right. What do buyers that are surface level buyers looking for? They're looking for the nicest home they can buy for what they're
Absolutely.
qualified for with the nicest schools. They're not looking for that opportunity, and they're willing to overpay in most situations.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yield all that other stuff. It's not an investor's.
And you hit the nail on the head a little while ago, Ryan, when you said, well, I would never sell my house that way. And I said 95%. Let's just say it's higher than that. Like, let's just say that 98% of people who want to sell would never even think about selling to somebody like me. As a matter of fact, they would look at a guy like me as, you know, the lowest life form, trying to take their equity. Yeah. All right. But here's the deal. There is a need and a market for that 2%. For those people that genuinely, like I said, my friend who was facing foreclosure, yeah, and nobody would help him out. Nobody. No, he couldn't find a buyer for his property. His realtor couldn't get it sold. And not the realtor's fault. The house fell out of escrow. But he was facing a trustee sale very rapidly in a little over a week. He was going to lose his house, and he was going to lose almost $100,000 of equity if I didn't step in and bail him out. There is an absolute need for people that do what I do, even if you're watching this and saying, wow, I don't agree with that guy, or I would never sell my house that way. Tons of people do. I get calls every day, and sometimes multiple times a day, from people that are looking for exactly what I have to offer.
No, you're 100% correct. I personally, with my family, we do move around, and we do get into pocket markets, Jacksonville. You know, I'm out here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we've looked at those deals, and we've tried to deal with the bank after it's gone into foreclosure. Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen easily.
What a joke. It's almost as if they take control back of that portfolio. They do. And they want top dollar for it after.
Right.
They're looking for something to make money on too. So you're going to trust the bank? Good luck.
Well, and the banks have deep pockets, and the banks don't care. They're going to hold on to that house. They don't care about you. I don't get my deals from banks and REO properties that are, you know, real estate owned, taking back in a foreclosure. I have to get the deal before it goes to foreclosure. Yeah. Because that's where I hold all the cards. I have the money. I have the power. The lender has no rights at all to the property until it goes to foreclosure. So the lender might want to take that property back, but they can't stop me from buying it from that person or paying them off. So I can circumvent that nasty lender every single time if I have the money to buy the property. Matt Money. So before we answer this question, I just want to say hi to Matt. Matt is actually the one that introduced me to Ryan. Yep. And Matt and I actually did a Grant Cardone video a while back, and Matt is a absolute stand-up guy. I can say that from watching his videos, doing a collab video with him, talking to him off camera extensively. This is the guy. He's the real deal. And I would say, just like Ryan, if you haven't subscribed to Matt Money's channel, you should do it. Saying that, his question, Matt says, I might move to houses if I get kicked back to the States. And for those of you that don't know, Matt isn't living in the States, and I forgot the name of the place where he's living.
He's in Trinidad, David.
Trinidad. He says, fix them up a tad, then move into the next one, next, and rent out the old one. That's a great strategy. And if you hold the property for 2 years, it's a primary residence, and all of that capital gain is tax-free.
That's right.
So, and I know people who do that.
I've known a lot of people. I've had people who have reached out to me through my independent investor network, and they've called it daisy chaining. I don't know if there's a specific name, but there's been a lot of people who have generated a lot of wealth doing that very strategy right there, which is extremely attractive to me. It kind of makes sense.
I know flippers that only flip one house every 2 years, and they do this. They will buy a flip. I have a friend. I literally just helped a friend of mine because he actually got it. A different friend back in January. He got into another situation. And trust me, not all my friends are in foreclosure. But I have another friend that back in January, he contacted me, and he had a similar situation. He had bought a flip, fixed it up, had quite a bit of equity, but he had a private money loan on it with kind of a high interest rate, and he got into a bad situation and just couldn't make the payment, was going to lose the property. So I paid it off, kind of did a refinance for him, bailed him out of foreclosure. And but he does this. He buys these properties as flips. In other words, heavy fixers. He moves into them, does all the work, holds them for 2 years, and then sells them and avoids all tax on all that gain. And then he just moves into the next one.
If it's rolled into a new project, right, David? Is that
well,
correct?
you don't even have to roll it into the next one, because you get,
Really?
after you've lived there 2 years, and I have to remember, I can't remember if it's 2 out of the last 3 or 3 of the last 5, whatever it is, but there's a way to do it so that when you sell the house, any gain that you have, unless you go over the 250,000 as a single or 500,000 married,
That's right.
all that gain is tax free.
Yes.
And then you can take that, move it, I guess, yes, roll it into the next property, but it's not really like a 1031 exchange. You actually are rolling that in, and there's, no tax on that money at all.
I did that very thing, David. It was 2 out of the last 5 when I left Houston. I rented the property when I left, and you just have to backdate the depreciation that you got on the property. That's it, which is significantly cheaper.
Another good question here.
Who you got?
Well, 2 really good ones. Christopher Blaine, I don't want to take this one yet, but Christopher Blaine has a good one, I think, asking about the current state of maybe buying right now, and which Ryan, you and I talked about.
Yeah.
But the one I think would be great to answer right now is the guy, Bullish TV at 5:44 p.m. What about finding an investor?
Bullish TV.
At 5:44, his screen name is Bullish TV.
Got it.
Okay. So he says, what about finding an investor that would front you the 20% down payment so you can finance the rest and then flip it? Is it even necessary to do 20% down on a flip? Best way to structure this? Well, it's a lot of questions, but
yeah,
let me just kind of say that I wouldn't be the type to loan you the 20%.
No.
And let me tell you why. It's because then I'm in second trust deed position, and I prefer not to be in second trust deed. I would be more likely to loan you all of the money, and maybe we partner on this flip. If you want to keep the property or you want to flip it yourself, I have some kind of role in that. That's what I would prefer to do. Although I have met investors that have no problem putting up that 20% on a flip. So you can definitely find them. There's a website called biggerpockets.com where there's a lot of investors. If you go to biggerpockets.com, you can find investors in your area to do some of these things. The next part of the question is, is it even necessary to do a 20% down? No, you don't have to. A lot of private money lenders, if you're getting a good deal on the property, if there's protective equity at the beginning, they will do 90%. I've loaned 90% many times. I've loaned 100% if there was a good enough position in the property. So you don't always have to have down payments or big down payments when you're buying flips or doing private money. That's something that I think a lot of people think, and it's kind of a myth that, oh, you got to have 30 or 40 or 50% down. That's not true. If it's a decent deal, investors will loan you most of the money.
Okay. Excellent.
And he said, best way to structure this. Again, for me, I wouldn't structure that. I would just simply probably partner and do that. What was the other question that I said we should take? Kind of asking about the current state of the market or something.
Yeah, it was from Chris, and I don't know if this is it, or the precise base mountain. Is that it?
I think this is it. I hear conflicting options. Are we on the? I always said that word, the precipice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I never was a genius in school, but okay. Are we on the precipice or at the base of the mountain with respect to the housing market? Well, that's a great question. Ryan and I were talking about this right before we started the live stream. Matter of fact, we had to interrupt that conversation to go live. And Ryan, I've been doing a lot of talking. What do you think about that? And then I'll answer.
Well, again, I mean, I'm an interesting specimen in that I do have longer term goals to buy a property and build a house. That's always been part of my goal. So I'm very, very careful with my moves. I do rely on instinct, just like I relied on my instinct when I got into my first home in Houston. Probably was as least financially fit at any time in my life, but did it, and it worked out. It was a risk reward type of thing that we took the risk. It was the nicest home I've owned so far.
Mm-hmm.
Then we bought in suburbia Detroit when General Motors was going down. It was really bad.
Right.
Every other home on every block were foreclosed and short sold at the time,
Okay.
and people thought I was crazy. But then New York, when we moved there, that made up my mind. Taxes there were good enough for me not to buy. Now, here I've been about 50-50. This has been the toughest deliberation for me. But if I was going to put my pulse on what I think has happened over the last month or two, and I think going through the jarring pandemic that we've just went through, I think people really suffered. I really do. And you cannot have an inject like that to the economy and have it not trickle down to real people. I think real people lost their job. I think real people were affected. So I'm not a doom and gloom guy, but would I buy a home right now? My actions speak louder than my words, and I will just tell folks that I have opted to wait. I have opted to save, stack my capital. I'm still heavily invested in the stock market and still heavily saving cash for that eventual property purchase and buy of that custom home. That's just my opinion.
I agree a lot with almost everything you said there. Actually, I'll just say I agree with everything you said. My feeling is this, and I can't be more vocal. I'm giving you the same advice right now, your viewers, the same advice that I would give, my brother or sister or closest friend, and that is absolutely do not buy right now unless you can get a really good deal. Now, that doesn't mean that buying right now is dumb. If
Right.
if you're looking at buying a property and holding it for the next 20 years, capitalize on the lowest interest rates in almost history. Ryan and I were talking. I looked at a chart today of interest rates over the last 200 years, and there's only been one time during World War II that interest rates were anywhere near this range. And other than that, for the last 200 years, interest rates have always been higher than what they are right now. So if you can get a good deal, use those low interest rates to buy. What I wouldn't do right now, I'll tell you in a second why. What I wouldn't do right now is be that person that goes out there and just says, interest rates are low, I gotta buy.
Yeah.
And you overpay for a house in a bidding war so you can get in. Here's why. As Ryan just said, and I'm not a doom and gloom guy either, but numbers don't lie. Tens of millions of people are unemployed right now.
Yep.
A lot of those people, sadly, are not going back to work because their companies are not going to resurface, or their companies are going to resurface, but they're going to downsize. I know so many business owners right now in California that are starting to reopen, and they're reopening with far less staff, and they're reopening at lower wages. And some of them, unfortunately, they're not going to make it. That includes, restaurants and hotels and just every business of every kind. Even, we're seeing big companies like, J.C. Penney's and Macy's and companies that are just really having a hard time. We are not through this. And the reason that the housing market has not collapsed yet is that everybody is getting a get out of jail free card with a forbearance or a get out of jail free card with not having to pay their rent or not having to pay their car payment because they can't repo it. But in the next 6 months to a year, it's going to catch up. And I think it could get bad. I hope not. Maybe there's going to be more stimulus. Maybe there's going to be more delays on evictions and forbearances. But be careful. Don't buy right now unless you get an amazing deal. I think interest rates are going to stay low for a while.
I concur. Interest rates will stay low for a while. I told you, Dave, I'm 50-50. Okay. So
Mm,
50% of my decision was still entertaining the idea of putting capital to risk and buying that house. I know
right.
how important it is, and it really does kill me because there's intangibles, there's quality of pride of ownership, and all
Sure.
the intangibles, quality of life, spiritual health, everything that you get from owning a house. And so I don't want to overshadow my true pulse on this market. I think you're right on the money. I think there's a lot of defensive things you can do if you are settled in an area and it is your absolute dream to buy a home. I think there's things once you are a homeowner to really maximize your opportunity as a homeowner. I think most people are pigs. Okay. I think most people, a lot of people are too dirty. Okay. We look at homes all the time and the pictures, 99% of the photos from inside people's homes do not impress me. They do not. And I'm like, what in the heck are you doing? You
Right.
can't just prepare the home and have a little bit of pride of ownership. It's in every write up, but people can help themselves. They really
Yeah.
can. But that's just, I hope you're wrong, David. I don't think you are.
Um, I hope I'm wrong too. I would love nothing more than for the market to roar back. To just to roar back like crazy. Everybody's back at work. All the businesses are firing 100%, and there's we go back to having low unemployment and wages stay high. But that is just not happening. There were so many companies out there that were like people living paycheck to paycheck and having to go the last 3 months with no income or low income. The numbers are changing every day, but I'm hearing, somewhere between 400,000 to 600,000 businesses maybe aren't going to reopen.
Yeah.
And I think that number continues to climb the longer that we stay, kind of in this quasi,
Yeah.
we're not really in a pandemic, but we're not really back to
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
And it's hard for companies to fire on all cylinders and just do what they need to do to make money.
It's just been unprecedented times. And I think adding to it, I think a lot of pocket markets, at least here especially, have enjoyed some significant appreciation over the last half decade. Home prices have really, really went up. They really have. A lot of people are sitting on a lot of equity, and I think that's actually providing a little bit of a perfect storm, I think.
Yes.
And I think, that euphoria, there's no defined time when that euphoria is going to wear off and the reality is going to set in. And me and you talked before the stream, David. My pulse is that some of that is becoming indicative just over the last 4 weeks. I'm
I
seeing
agree.
I'm seeing home prices drop. I'm seeing some panic selling. I'm seeing
Yeah.
some folks that are putting some stuff on the market that perhaps maybe we talked a little bit about the custom homes compared to some of the track
Mhm.
homes that are going on, because you're right, inventory has been so low. So these home builders have come into these areas, and here in this area, they've bought up farmland, which in any other capacity would be used for farming, but now is being converted into neighborhoods. And these homes are being chucker blocked into these neighborhoods for maximum profit, and people don't know where to go, David. They need a place to stay. They need to be around those good schools, and they're
Yeah.
paying that 425, 450 premium on these homes. And I would contend that they're not worth more than 3 or 3.25. That's just my assessment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think things are really inflated in many areas of the United States. So I think to a certain extent, a little bit of a reset on the real estate market, maybe even a 10% drop at this point, I think would be healthy in real estate, and then come back. Um, I, I'm dying to talk about one or the other or both of the podcasts that I did this last week,
Absolutely.
and since I know you won't do it, Ryan, I'm going to give a plug for your podcast. So Ryan does this great podcast over on Anchor, and like me on 7 or 8 other locations. And Ryan actually motivated me to start the podcast that I recently started. And I did 2 shows on my podcast recently. And Ryan, since it's your channel, I'm going to let you pick which one we talk about. Do you want to talk about how it's now cheaper to buy a house on minimum wage, or would you like to talk about my $415,000 real estate investing mistake?
I've heard both story. I listened to the first podcast, the one I thought that was extremely intriguing, and I think that would probably benefit the masses. And I don't know if you have a preference on what story you feel more interested in.
Which one is it you want?
I like the first one, the interest rates being historically low.
Oh, okay.
I just think that it's an incredible opportunity to get your insights on that. I really do.
Okay, so if you want to hear the actual podcast, which I think is about 11 minutes,
yeah,
you can find this actual podcast at my name, davidoldenburg.com. Real simple. Okay, so I mean, sometimes it's good to do YouTube channel and podcast because it forces you to research things that you might not always want to research, or even you don't research to that level. So it makes you realize things, and sometimes you have that aha moment where you're going, wow, I didn't realize that. And so I was trying to come up with a great idea for a podcast about a week ago. And I was remembering the very first house that I bought. I bought it in 1987. I was young. I was, I think I was 19, I think I went into escrow at 19 and bought it like right when I was 20. And I was with a woman that I'm no longer with. And we both made minimum wage. Actually, we both made a little more than minimum wage. California minimum wage in 1987 was $4.25, but we both made $5 an hour. We were really living it up, big pay. And we were young. We were like 19 years old, and we thought we need to buy a house together. And so, which I can, debate whether that was a smart idea or not, but we decided to buy a house. And so we went out. We couldn't afford a house in a nice area, so we bought a house in I don't want to say it was the hood in Sacramento, but it wasn't the nicest area. I'll just put it that way. And we found a house for $50,000. And we bought it. We bought it on an FHA loan. The interest rate was 10% at the time. That was the going rate. We paid 10%. We bought it. Our PI payment, principal and interest, was $438 a month. So making $10 an hour, it took us 43.8 hours each a month of work, little over 1 week out of the month, to make that house payment, the principal and interest part of it. And so I was reminiscing on that the other day, and I thought, man, if only I had kept that house, man, that would be, imagine what it would sell for. So I hopped onto MLS and I comped it like a realtor would. What is that house selling for today? And I thought, wow, it's selling for $260,000 today instead of 50. So it's had a 420% increase. But minimum wage where I'm at is now $13 an hour per person. So 2 people would be making $26 an hour, and interest rates instead of 10% are now about 3%.
Yep.
And so if you run the payment comes out to, I think, $1,096, meaning that if you make minimum wage today, it is cheaper to buy a house right now in California than it was 33 years ago back in 1987. And the only reason it's cheaper is because rates are so incredibly low. And of course, wages have also gone up some.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that when I heard that. And that's one of the real reasons why, if you did have time on your hands too, locking in that rate, David, if you were looking to just do a 30-year fixed and push it out and buy that home, maybe you're a first-time buyer, that your job is solid. You're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That might be one of those things that's very attractive right now, because we're not going to negative. I do agree with you. I think they're staying lower for longer, but I'm not a fan of low interest rates, anemically low. I'm not a fan of this manufactured low interest rate that we've had really as a tool over the last 10 years. We've
Right.
really stimulated, and I want to keep this to real estate because I'm dabbling in my stock knowledge, but I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a little bit more health when institutions are paid to borrow money. And right now they're suffering because they're not making what they should be making by lending money. And so I don't know what incentive is there. I don't.
Well, you know me, Ryan. I'm a financial wizard guy, and I'm a former stockbroker as well. And so I live, eat, and breathe the stock market on a daily basis. So I know we're talking real estate right now, but if you ever want to go outside of that and push it over to the finance side, I have my own opinion on QE to infinity.
Yeah.
I think it's very unwise for us to be doing what we're doing right now.
It is.
I think it provides a temporary fix, and ultimately, I think there's more pain down the road because of it.
It does. We're not the only ones that feel that way.
But yeah, and so I was looking at some of the comments here. What is the one? Swiss Chris?
Swiss Chris. Yep, I can throw it on the screen, David.
Yeah. Swiss Chris says sellers in my area of Pennsylvania are getting to 30 to 40K more than what they would have just 6 months ago. There are bidding wars right now. Buyers are offering 15 above asking price.
Yep.
Same thing where I'm at in California. Pretty much everywhere. There's extremely low inventory, extremely low interest rates, and that is temporarily, I believe, causing a tight market and causing prices to go higher. And I think that's going to change.
Careful.
But right now, yes, if you're looking to buy right now, or you're trying to get in before interest rates go higher, it is hard to get a good deal right now. And that's one of the reasons why I would say, unless you can get some kind of a good deal, maybe like we talked about earlier with an investor or something, or just a property that needs a lot of work, I'd be hesitant to buy right now, unless you're of the mindset that you can truly stomach a drop in that property because you just love that house and you're not going to move. Like the house that I'm in right now, my wife and I bought this house brand new in 1996.
Yeah.
I was 30 years old. I was actually 29 when I bought this house. I'm now 53. And we paid it off a while back, and we've been in the same house. I have a 23-year-old son, and when we moved into this house, we had no kids.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to buy a house like that, who cares about price? My house has quadrupled in price in those years. And so if it goes down a little bit, I mean, who cares? But I'm talking more the short term. Ryan, you talked about being military and, every 3, 5, 7 years. I grew up as a military brat. I know what it's like to move around every couple years. And for some people, maybe buying, no matter what the deal is, it's just not the right time.
I would address and just thank Swiss Chris for her question. I think she really touches on the pulse of what's going on right now. Just like you said, David, in the short term, me personally, and this is my personal, probably very jaded opinion based on my own personal situation with my profession. I'm not playing ball. Okay. Your question really does. It alludes to a lot of people right now who may be panic buying, okay, and looking to play ball and engage in that level of bidding war. Now, I don't know what these finance appraisers are doing at the end of all these deals, if they're just writing all this business, because this is what kind of got us in trouble 10 years ago. It is overstating value and not stepping in and doing the right thing by assessing true value. But I really just appreciate the heck out of this comment. I think it's a very smart comment. It really does kind of draw what I think is going on right now. And
I agree.
I feel it's a seller's market. What can I say? In 2 words, it's a seller's market. If you're looking to sell a home right now is a good time, but where will we be in 5 years? I don't know. That's interesting. You got to David?
I want to talk about that $415,000 mistake, but
Do it.
there's a great question on here from
Ethos.
yes. Okay, he says, what is your advice in regard to looking for a foreclosure in the next 6 to 18 months? We want a rental property that would eventually become a summer home in the future. Now, the one thing I don't know from this is, are you looking to buy it as a primary initially and convert it to a rental, or are you just looking to buy a rental property? So what do you think the question is asking specifically, Ryan?
So I know Dan real well. He's a friend of the channel.
Okay.
He works in suburbia DC area.
Okay.
So very, very established job. And I think probably the focus there, I don't know, I'd look in the Outer Banks or Kill Devil Hills or something like that, but maybe something he's looking at a little bit along the coastline up there, maybe in Maryland, something at Ocean City, something like that. So
Do you think he's looking for a rental or a primary?
it'll be a rental. I don't want to
Okay.
speak for Dan if he throws it in
Oh,
there. Yeah, he says
he
rental.
said rental. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Now it's easier to answer that question. So are there going to be some deals in the next 6 to 18 months on foreclosures? Once they lift all these forbearances, and remember, the CARES Act kind of gave a get out of jail free card for a year. They said we'll give you a 6-month forbearance, and then if you still need it, you can get an extension for another 6 months. So it's potentially possible that we don't have a big problem till next March or April, where people are facing, where they truly have to start making these payments again. And now, I mean, right now, a lot of people are just living in their houses for free, and so they're not making any payments, and they're not being foreclosed upon in many cases. So let's fast forward out and to a point where we have some foreclosures. Market gets a little bit better. We get through this pandemic, but we still have some people that didn't make it, and they also have some equity because housing prices have risen a lot over the last 5 to 7 years. So how can you benefit from that? Well, very easy. You want to really keep your finger on the pulse of what houses near you or in the areas that you want to buy are going into foreclosure. A great way to do that is, I think the site is Property Radar. I think it's propertyradar.com. There might be another one that might be called foreclosure.com, but you can Google this. And you're basically looking for services that will send you emails every time that a property goes into default. Either they get behind on payments or it goes to trustee sale in the areas that you're looking for. And now you have the addresses of the properties, you have the other information. You can reach out to those sellers direct and say, I want to buy this property from you. And here's the cool thing. As an investor looking for a rental, you're going to be willing to pay them more than somebody like me that is maybe a flipper.
True.
And so you'll have a better ability to be able to buy a property like that. And so when you hear that foreclosures are starting to heat up, get a subscription for either Property Radar or I think foreclosure.com, but Google which one is best or what other services there are. And then just cherry pick what foreclosures that you want to buy in what neighborhoods.
Those websites that you discussed, David, those are pretty reliable sources. I'm on quite a few. I've got on X Homes before, and that's somewhat more frustrating for me than anything. And I'm just not sure if they're that credible. They're interesting to look at, and they're real properties certainly, but I've never really tried to follow through and actually, take ownership of a property using one of those. Am I okay to pursue that route?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
I mean, anybody can do it.
Just want to make sure that those properties aren't the ones that are picked over and, they've made their way onto those websites and all the good deals are gone,
Well, let's talk about that. Houses that go into foreclosure are not always the best houses. Yeah. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you get lucky that somebody is in foreclosure and they're still keeping their yard up and
Yeah.
They're still, keeping everything up. But foreclosure is normally an economic problem. Let's face it, if you had $1 million in the bank, you're not going to be in foreclosure. You're just going to make your payment. Most people that enter into foreclosure, they do so because they're having a financial hardship. They lost their job. They went through a divorce. They had a death in the family. They don't have the money they used to have, or they can no longer keep the payment or the condition of the property up. So by nature, or maybe nature is the wrong word, by default, when properties go into foreclosure, I always expect that at the very least, they're probably going to need a little bit of work. They might need paint and flooring. They might need a full gut. They may be like a flip. But so you do have to do your due diligence if you're going to get in that foreclosure market. But if a property is in foreclosure, they're behind on their payments, or they're facing a trustee sale, and you can communicate directly with the seller, the beauty is you can get into the home and you can talk with them one-on-one and negotiate a deal. It's not like going to an auction at the courthouse steps where you maybe have never seen inside the property and you could really get into a bad situation. As I said earlier, I like to buy properties before they go to foreclosure.
Yeah.
While they're in foreclosure, but before the lender takes them back.
Yeah, and some of those websites, they do differentiate between those properties that have entered into foreclosure, Dave, and that are scheduled to go into. And you can filter those searches to take a look at what is queued up. And I think that would probably be a sweet spot. I didn't really know how to differentiate between those two before. That's incredible.
And like I talked earlier, hook up with an investor, somebody that can buy that property cash for you, negotiate that foreclosure with the seller, or do a JV. Before we finish, I know we're talking a long time already, but I absolutely want to talk before we get off about joint venturing, how to flip your own house, or how you can do flips if you don't have a lot of money. Literally, how you can get in there and make a ton of money, even if you only have 10 grand or 15 grand. So, actually, let's talk about that right now.
Do it. Floor's yours.
Let's do my $415,000 real estate investing mistake. Let's do that after this. Mm-hmm. So, let's talk joint venturing. I actually spoke to a big group of real estate investors on stage March 3rd, right before all the COVID stuff hit, where I could still get a bunch of people to come into a room and shake hands and everything else. And it was a week later, everything fell out. But I spoke on this topic. I spoke on joint venturing, and let me just give you an overview. Basically, a joint venture is, and Ryan, to make it simple, I'll use you. So we'll say Ryan owns a house, and for whatever reason, that property is in foreclosure. Ryan made some mistakes, and it's in foreclosure, and Ryan has it on the market, or maybe he wants to sell. Maybe it's not even on the market yet, and he's in a situation where he's like, man, money's been tight the last 3 to 5 years. Slowly but surely, I've been having problems. Now I haven't been making my payment for 6 months. I can't afford repairs. I can't afford to make my payment. My lender's going to take the house back. I'm going to try to rush it, put it on the market, but everybody's going to lowball me. The vultures are going to come in. Everybody's going to see that you're facing foreclosure, and a regular buyer can't buy that property. There's not enough time. So it's got to be a cash buyer, and cash buyers are flippers, and they're offering you 100, 150, maybe 175,000 under market. And Ryan's sitting there saying, I don't want to do that. I worked so hard, and now just because I had a couple of bad years, I'm going to lose all of my equity. Okay. If you're watching this and you want to help that person out, that neighbor or that friend or that property you find, you don't need a lot of money. Usually when somebody gets behind on their payments, let's say they have a $2,000 a month payment, they're behind 6 months. It's only $12,000. That's not much at all. Maybe with penalties, it's 15. Maybe really bad, it's 20. You'd be amazed how many times I can stop a foreclosure for 10 grand. Yeah. Or 15 grand, and do a joint venture with that owner, where we go in there and do the work. And maybe you're not an expert. Maybe you're not a flipper. You can hire people. You can play contractor. You can project manage it and do the basics. You don't have to go overboard. Put some flooring in, like some laminate, do the painting. You can probably paint it yourself, spruce it up, clean it up, mow the lawn, tear down the weeds, trim the bushes, and then put that property back on the market as a regular priced property that is not a distress sale. It's not in foreclosure. Sell it at full price and work out a deal with that seller as far as how much money you get out of it. Trust me, you can flip houses with a joint venture if you have 10 or 15 or 20 grand. And I teach people these strategies. I've had people that have taken $10,000 and partnered with somebody that had a lot of equity, put 10,000 into a property, and a month, 2 months later made 50 grand back. So, man, the opportunities are endless. Don't think small time. Go outside of the box. There's some awesome strategies out there for making money.
Just incredible. Floor's yours, Dave. You want to roll into your next example? I never even knew that existed, honestly. I guess I always kind of come back to the, there's a lot of people. I'm one of them. I do have capital, David. I could be one of those people that could absolutely step in and help somebody. I'm just such a positive person. I always look at the world as nobody's ever in trouble, and that's just not the reality of it. There are good people out there that have worked really, really hard, have fallen on some bad times, and maybe just need a little assistance. And
let me give you a statistic that's real powerful. And the numbers that I give you may be off a little bit because this number changes constantly. But there's approximately 1.8 million vacant houses in the United States right now. Approximately 1.8 million vacant houses for one reason or another.
Yeah.
It could be that somebody died and that house is stuck in probate.
Yeah.
It could be that the property, somebody abandoned it. We see that. Maybe it got a citation against it. The city came in and said, hey, if you're not going to pay your sewer bill, or if you're not going to fix that broken window,
Yep.
or you're not going to fix that crack in the sidewalk or whatever, and they put a thing on the house that says, hey, you got to move. And maybe they didn't have a lot of money. Maybe they just abandoned the house. Maybe they inherited it and they left. $1.8 million, 1.8 million houses.
Yeah.
What a great place to start looking for sellers that might be willing to work with you. In other words, go out there and try to find the vacant houses that are in your area, maybe within a 50-mile radius of you. Try to find every vacant house you possibly can, and then reach out to them. You can skip trace for about 15 cents per house through a website called, I think it's called REI Skip, which is REI like real estate investor skip, reiskip.com. I'm almost positive that's the website. But you go there and you can skip trace small numbers of houses. And there's also websites, like if you want to find out who the owners are, you can go there first. For a very small fee, you can get all the information on who the owner is and whether there's mortgages and everything else. You can take that data, put it into skip tracing. And here's the part that's going to blow your mind. And I say this because I do this as an investor. So this is a massive trade secret here. But you can skip trace that house and literally they'll kick back their cell phone, their home number, and even in most cases, their email address to contact them. And you can do that on properties in foreclosure. You can do that on properties that are vacant. I mean, there's no reason, even if you don't have a lot of money, that you can't operate at the same level that I'm operating at. And I have, far more money and experience. So, use some of these tips and tricks to get these deals, even if you just want to buy the property for yourself and you maybe don't want to flip it. You just want to get a crazy deal on a house that you're going to move in for yourself.
Yeah. It's just incredible, Dave. I'm taking notes over here like a student. I forget I'm running a live stream here, David, because I'm just kind of listening to some of this. And I know you're going down your laundry list, so please continue.
Okay. This one, I did a podcast on this the other day, and I titled it something like My $415,000 Real Estate Investing Mistake. And I know some of you are probably thinking, oh my God, did this guy lose $415,000 on a deal? Well, if you were listening earlier, I said that I've never lost money on a real estate investing deal. So, where's the catch here? Well, here's what happened. And I'm saying this because this is a lost opportunity mistake. But I hope you learned something from this, because I really did. And I can say I will never make the same mistake again. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know I made this mistake until I did the podcast and I researched the numbers. And then I went, oh my gosh, I left $415,000 on the table, plus, $25,000 a year in cash flow. So here's what happened. In 1994, I was single. It was right before I met my wife. I was single in 1994, and I was in the mortgage and real estate industry, and I bought a house. I bought a 4-bedroom, 2-bath in Orangevale, California, which is kind of near Sacramento. The house was listed for $150,000. Quick little bit on negotiation. It was listed for $150,000. The realtor told me the seller would never take less, and I said, okay. And I said, I want to make an offer. Realtor said, what do you want to offer? I said, $110,000. And the realtor said, I'm not going to offer $110,000. That is a slap in the face. The seller will never accept it, and it's going to make me look bad, you look bad, and you're going to lose the house.
Present it. It's your job.
I said, present it.
It's your job.
I'm not going to get into profanity on this, but I basically, you know what I said.
Yeah.
And so the I'll call it stupid realtor, listing agent, I let him represent me and take both sides. He very reluctantly wrote the offer, and I mean reluctantly. He was irritated the whole time he wrote the offer. When he went to give me the offer to sign it, he kind of threw it at me to sign. So I signed the offer. I signed the offer at $110,000. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. 3 days later, I get a call from the realtor, and he's still irritated and angry at me. And he says, well, just like I thought, they didn't take your offer at 110. I go, well, what happened? He goes, they countered you. And I said, well, how much? He said, 110.5. I'm like, they countered me $500?
Wait.
And so they wanted 150 for this house. I offered 110.5, and they took it. I was in shock. And so I thought, wow. So I bought this house in 94. Then I met my wife like 2 weeks later, and we started living together, and we decided to make this house a rental. My PITI house payment on this house that I purchased was $900. And at the time, I was lucky. I was able to rent it for $900. So I didn't lose anything. I didn't make anything. A year and a half later, in 1996, we decided to get married. And we wanted to start a family. And I thought to myself, and stupidly at the time, I thought to myself, well, I don't want this rental property hanging over my head. What if they need a repair? I don't want to have to run over there and do a repair while I'm, raising a family or whatever. And so I put the house on the market. I sold it for just enough to break even. Okay. After commissions and closing costs, like I bought it for 110.5. I think I sold it for 120. And after commissions and closing costs and everything else, it was a break even. So I was like, whew, I got lucky on that one. Bought it for 110, didn't lose anything, didn't make anything. I moved on to my life. Honestly, other than the fact that I drive past this house 3 times a week, I never really thought about it again. Well, I go to do my podcast the other day, and I'm thinking, I wonder what that house is worth today. and I wonder what it's renting for. So I go do my work. I go on to MLS and Zillow. I double check everything, run all the local comps. I could sell this house in 30 minutes for $415,000 today. Okay. It rents, I could rent it in half an hour at $2,100 a month, and I could probably get $2,500 a month for it. And this was 26 years ago I bought it. The way I accelerate mortgages, I would own this property free and clear today, meaning that I would have $415,000 equity in this property, and I'd have between $2,100 and $2,500 a month of additional cash flow. That was my $415,000 mistake. I should have held that property.
Yeah.
My advice is this. If you ever buy a property and you decide to make it a rental, and you're not losing money on it, and you're thinking about selling it, don't.
Think twice.
Just don't. Because historically, about every 20 years, properties double in value. And we've seen that the last 100 years in California. Yes. About every 20 years or so, it's not a exact science, but about every 20 years, property values double. And so if you're young, you're 25 or 30, and you're buying a house, and you're thinking, well, let's sell it and buy the next one. Maybe rent it and buy the next one if you can. Because as you get older, your incomes are going to rise. And also, that house that you bought when you were 30, that housing payment is going to stay the same. So your rents are going to keep going higher, and your income is going to keep going higher. And think about this, and this is what I said, Ryan, on our rent versus buy live stream, is fast forward, you get to 60 years old, 50, whatever age you want to retire, 60 years old, you're thinking about retiring. Imagine if the only investment that I had at retirement was this $415,000 property. Imagine if I could retire right now and get $2,500 a month of cash flow, plus Social Security, and know that if things got bad, I also have $415,000 in equity. I can sell that house. If you have no other retirement plan other than buying a property and making it a rental all your life, like maybe only one property, that's brilliant. And I would say do it. I'd have to go on whether you should be the person that buys 10 rentals, unless you have the ability to do that. But by all means, I think everybody should buy a property and make it a rental if you don't want to live there, and just hold it for a really, really long period of time, because someday that property is going to pay off huge.
I had a very similar situation. Our very first home, we paid $140,000 for it, brand new. It was a beautiful home. And some of the justifications that we went through when we did end up selling that, it would have been a break-in sale when we left. So I did opt to rent it and carry it for 2-3 more years. We rented the property. So we did fall under that 2 and 5. And when we did opt to sell it, that was part of the decision is, okay, it's either going to need to be long-term, or we need to go ahead and cash out now in some of this equity. And we had about 30,000 in it. So the decision wasn't a break-even decision. It was we've got a little equity here. That's a lot more money than we had probably seen before. It was our first home. And that's the toughest time to make those decisions, to say, man, alive, should we have the hindsight to save it long-term? And we do talk about that nowadays. We talk about that home, and we're like, man, we could have done it. We could have kept it long-term. And I think in retrospect, the right decision would have been to hold that property. Yep.
I think, and there's a comment here. I mean, we don't necessarily need to bring it up, but it just says, don't forget to deduct your expenses off that $2,300 rental amount. Sure. Yeah, that goes without saying. If you're getting 23 or 25 or 1,500 or whatever in rental income, that isn't pure profit. You probably have to pay fire insurance. You probably have to pay, depending on where you are, some level of property tax. there's periodic repairs that come up on that property. It's not an absolute dollar for dollar profit. My point with this is that there was 415,000 of equity that is all profit minus closing costs to sell it. That 21 or 2,500 of monthly cash flow, some money would come out of that. But heck, I'd be happy if all the money came out of it. I mean, if I had a rental property that had 415,000 in equity and I was renting it for 23, heck, even if I had $1,000 a month in expenses, I'd be thrilled just because of the equity.
I could go on, Dave, as to why I like real estate more than I do the stock market. Again, I won't entertain the crowd tonight, but real estate is something tangible. You know, it's asset backed. You know, it's something that can be used. You could move into it, live in it. You can generate cash flow from it. It will appreciate in value, unlike many of the other things we justify buying in this life. I put it in that high category with stock, bond, and real estate. And I just think that really hit home with me when you said to look at that as more of a retirement vehicle, if nothing else. Maybe even the stock portfolio is fine, but even to diversify your portfolio across a different asset class, I think is just a key takeaway.
Well, you know, one thing, Ryan, you and I both know this about the market, the stock market. You know, when you put money in the market, you're putting it in generally long term if you're an investor.
Yes.
You know, we've had this conversation before. I'm a trader.
Yes.
So when I enter the stock market, I'm usually in most investments for 15 minutes to a day or two. Yep. I do a lot of swing trading, and I do pretty well swing trading. But from an investment standpoint, yes, that property, if you buy it, let's not even say you get the best price on it. Let's just say, let's take right now. Let's just take the market we're in right now.
Yep.
Let's say you're watching this and you're 25 or 30 years old and you're thinking, man, I've got a job, or I've got a few bucks, or I've got a friend I could do this with. I could buy a house, but man, what if this is the top of the market? These guys are talking about how the market could come down. You know, it'd be hard to go wrong if you bought a property at 25 or 30 right now with current interest rates that you could rent for about the price of your house payment, and you have the ability to keep it 20 or 30 years. I don't know how you could possibly go wrong. Even if the market dropped 20% or 30 or 40, or like in the Great Recession, it dropped 50%. Over 20 or 30 years, it's more than going to come back and go higher. And eventually, either because you've been making that house payment, it's going to get paid down to zero, or because you've made it a rental, somebody else is going to be making the payment. Eventually, that house goes to zero. That's the beautiful thing about an amortized loan. Yep. You can't help it. If all you have to do is make the payment, and every month it gets lower and lower and lower until one day you wake up, like my wife and I did a few years ago, and said, wow, we only owe like 30 grand left on this house. And we just lump sum paid it off. And so we owned our house free and clear. And it was wow, talk about an empowering feeling. You know, where I live in an area where houses are, $600,000 to $900,000 easy, and I have a house that's owned free and clear that I bought when I was 29 years old. Remember, I went into contract on it. So what a great retirement vehicle. Even if I had no money at all, even if I was broke right now, I have a house right now that I live in that if I moved out of it, I could rent this house for probably $3,500 a month, and I could make somewhere between $700,000 to $800,000 of cash, and then go collect Social Security. And I'm not that old yet, thank God, but I'm going to get there. And I could go collect Social Security. So yes, buy a property as an investment, but continue to invest in the stock market. Yeah. Doing what you do, Ryan, and I want to give a plug here for you, Ryan. We haven't known each other a terribly long period of time. Again, Matt Money introduced us a few months ago. Yep. And I've been watching your live streams and watching your videos. And man, I just love the style of teaching that you have, with your audience and your channel, because what you're telling them is you're telling them the truth. You're telling them, like, you don't want to come to me and learn how to invest in the stock market, because as more of a day trader or a swing trader, I'm a former stockbroker. I have insane knowledge, and on top of that, I have money to lose.
Yeah.
Don't do what I do. Follow the advice of Ryan. Ryan, when I look at the way you're building out your portfolios, when I look at the way you have these set up with M1 Finance, where people can just go in and basically copy your portfolio, depending on whether it's dividend or aggressive growth or whatever. I mean, when I was young, nobody would do that for you. Like, well, first off, there was barely any internet, but I mean, the fact that people can follow you and they can kind of follow along with what you're doing, and each week they can learn and come on the live stream and ask questions for free, and then copy your portfolio. Man, if you're a newer investor out there and you're wanting to get into the stock market, I mean, they should be jumping all over the portfolios that you have with M1 Finance and getting their foot in the door and following what you're doing. It's powerful if you're young.
Well, I appreciate that. I will add this too. If we can inspire people to take this on as an evolving discipline, Dave, you're early 50s, right? I'm early 40s, and look at us. We're going back and forth on a Saturday night intently trying to get ourselves. I'm taking notes over here, Dave, right? So that just speaks to my hunger. So the portfolio is great. And me being as transparent as I am, providing that access to how I seek my exposure to the market, that can really help, because it's not manufactured. It's real.
Right.
It's a real portfolio. There's no perfect portfolio, but I want people to understand what it takes. It really does take at certain times to be a follower. Like tonight, I'm conducting this live stream and I'm doing a lot of listening, David, because this is your wheelhouse. But I think that's the real takeaway for a lot of people who will catch this live stream. I think we're competing with the president right now. But I tell you what, this has just been extremely enjoyable for me. And anybody who's picked up, I've got notes here, and I just couldn't take notes the whole time because I can't forget I'm running this thing and facilitating it. But it is interesting. There isn't a lot of people out there that will take the time to really be humbled, let people know what mistakes you've made, and also kind of tell people what the journey has been like. It's not all roses. I don't want people to tune into this and say, I want to be an investor like Ryan, or I want to be a real estate guy like David. I want people to really understand how much work goes on and validates us sitting across from people and saying, even sometimes as tentative as it might be for me, because it does take some courage. It does take some courage to come onto social media and say, you know what, maybe I do have something to share with people. And I do think that if anybody can take away something from my channel, I really hope it is the sincerity in really wanting to convey that people can do this, Dave. And I think just from the real estate piece, man alive, you've opened my eyes to some of these things to make this thing a little bit more accessible. Real estate, I've told you before, is like poker for me. It scares me. It's because it's a big fish game. It really is. And
people who come to my live events when I'm on stage, or they listen to my past radio shows or different things that I've done, they don't realize, I became a millionaire really quick. It only took me 30 years. I say that jokingly because people, the millennial generation, and I think it's everybody. I'm not going to pick on millennials. I think everybody. People come into my meetings, my live events, and they walk up to me after I've been doing a keynote for 90 minutes on some topic, and they walk up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Dave, everything you said, I'm passionate. I'm excited about real estate. It speaks to my heart. I want to do this. And they're looking for a way that they can make $1 million or retire in like 2 to 3 years.
I know, man.
And I'm like, you can't look at where I am. I've had 30 years of running companies, working 16-hour days, raising kids, being exhausted all the time, putting money in slowly and watching it grow with different investments. I wish I could go on here and be like the Mark Zuckerberg or, the Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. I would love to be that guy, but I'm not. But here's the cool thing about where I am. I took the road that anyone can take. You don't have to be a Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. You can just simply get a job, work hard, sacrifice, put money away, invest it, and eventually have a ton of money.
Yep.
And that's what like my grandparents did during the Great Depression. They were buying houses, you hear about this. Oh, I was making 6 cents an hour working in the, as a welder, working on ships.
That's right.
But you know what they did? They sacrificed. They worked hard. They didn't blow money stupidly. They slowly invested it. They bought real estate and sometimes stocks. Those things went up in value. And over time, they built wealth. And anyone can do it.
Yeah, I just think now with the power of social media bringing people, I joked last night on the live stream, Dave, if we would have ever had the opportunity to meet or run into each other at a Vaughn's, would we have come together on a common platform or would we have come together because we're both picking out the same avocados? It's the power of social media, I think. And that's why a lot of people will tune into this message after we post it. And there was a ton of value that was dropped in this, Dave. There really was. And I just want to thank you. Do you mind getting to a couple more comments here? There's a couple good ones.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Put up any comments you want.
Sure. Brian Scott's been asking some killer questions tonight. I just want to cherry pick.
Oh, this is a great question. What's your thoughts on owning a home free and clear? Do you have a specific amount of equity you like to keep in your properties? This is a great question, Ryan, because I talked about this on the rent versus buy live stream. Yeah. If you just heard me say I own my property free and clear, you're probably thinking, well, gosh, he has all this equity that he's not doing anything with. But that's not true. I didn't want to brag on this or talk about it, but what I did was I went out and got a line of credit on my house. So I have a $300,000. So I don't have a lot of my equity, but I've got about $300,000 of equity in a HELOC line of credit on my house. And so I don't make any payments on that money unless I'm using it. Okay. And what I do with that money is periodically I loan that money to flippers at 10% and 3 points, which is the going rate where I'm at. So I make 13% of the money, but I can also churn it multiple times a year, meaning that I can make, give or take, after all the times I'm not loaning it out, am loaning it out, I can pretty easily make about 15 to 20% a year on that money. So that $300,000 can generate me on the low side $30,000 a year, on the high side maybe 45 or 50. So I have a house that's not only no house payment, but my primary residence actually generates $3,000+ a month. Yeah. And so, yes, that's another thing you can do with equity on a primary. And so to answer your question, how much equity do I think is good? Depends on what you want to do with the equity. If you want to use the equity, then having all the equity possible is great. If you want to leverage that money somewhere else, like let's say you get your house owned free and clear, and now the market drops and you're like, wow, markets drop, rates are great. I've got an opportunity to buy a foreclosed property. I can get a great deal on it. Why not cash that equity out of your house and go pay cash for that rental property and use that equity in your primary to buy another investment that's going to go up probably a lot when the market comes back. Yep. Or you just rent it out, and every month that person is giving you money to pay your own HELOC back.
Incredible.
There's always things that you can do if you just are smart about it and you use strategy, I would say.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to take a crack at this question here. This is partially in my wheelhouse, and then I'll let you follow up. But Blood Phantom says, hey, guys, I have 170. First of all, congratulations. You are in a category that is well above the cut. Okay.
Very amazing.
I'll be the first to pat you on the back there at 24. That's incredible. Rule of 72 puts you at 7 figures fairly quick and fairly early. With that said, I know a couple of 24-year-olds that have done YouTube and are making huge money, 50,000 plus a month. Okay.
Right.
Ironically, those same individuals, and they've told me this directly, they go into the bank and they can't get a loan yet because they are self-employed and they don't quite have that established. So what David mentioned at the top of the live stream with working on your credit, I think you're in a position that I would consider the driver's seat. So if it is your goal at 24 to own a home, and with everything we've said about the nature of your employment, how solid that is, real estate, I hold in very, very high regard. I really do. It's in the top 1 to 2 of those assets that you really do need to pursue. Now, if there's some education on your end that needs to happen before you make that purchase, it's not going to hurt. Rushing out and jumping into something right now, you may be benefited to just wait, continue to build that credit, get it above that 800, because that's the key. And I don't know, with a 170 stock portfolio, if you're looking at a credit score of up over 800, I don't think you've got the time. And I don't want to imply that I know what your credit score is, but there's just not a lot of time there. But I think you being in the driver's seat, I think continue to invest. I think we're in a market right now where I'm kind of encouraging people to stay with their program. Don't get crazy. Don't take large chunks of capital and throw it at this market here. Continue along your program, but be defensive, use scale. And where that opportunity does arise for you to make that leap of faith, then fine. But at 24, I was not married. I was just seeking out that profession. So there's a lot that can happen between 20 and 30 years old that, David talked about being single and then 2 weeks later buying coming to the decision to sell off that property. So you'll be a lot more established, I would imply, probably closer to 30 than you are now closer to 20. But Dave, you want to take a crack at that? I
do. First, I like everything you said, Ryan. Here's what I would add to that. At 24 years old, you're a great candidate for an FHA first-time home buyer loan with, in most places, 3.5% down. So down payment's pretty small. I don't know where you live, but let's just say for argument's sake that wherever you live, you could buy a house for $300,000. Maybe you can't. Maybe you need more than that, but let's just use 300. So you can buy a house for $300,000. Your down payment, a little over 10 grand, maybe closing costs, another 5. So for 15 grand of your 170,000, you could put down payment and closing costs down, and you could buy a house. FHA is pretty easy to qualify for. They're very lenient, or the most lenient, on credit. So on credit scores and credit history and all that. So talk to an FHA lender, find out what you can actually qualify for. And actually, did you mention you don't have a job, or you have or it says no job right now? Okay. You're going to get a job, obviously, at some point, or I'm assuming you will. If it's a salaried type job, you can usually use that income to qualify with a FHA loan almost immediately. If it's hourly, you might have to work a little while. And maybe you just don't even want to work with your money. I don't know. But if you get a job somewhere and you have the ability to prove it and you have the ability to qualify and buy a house, I would do it. Now, because you have 170,000, you could also buy a house non-traditionally, go like I talked earlier about working with investors. Problem is the financing on that's going to be really high. And so I wouldn't do that unless you're buying a property significantly under market. But here's the thing. If you could buy a house, let's just say by 30, like Ryan said, and you can put down just 3.5%, only use a small amount of your portfolio, and you hold that house, like we're talking now, for 20 years, and it doubles in value and you pay it off, Well, now that $300,000 house that you purchased is now worth $600,000. It's owned free and clear. It can cash flow, and you still have all of your money that you made in the stock market all of those years. And as Ryan said, using the rule of 72, that's going to add up to be big. You're on a great path. I mean,
Yeah.
I was not where you are at 24. At 24, I was just starting to have a little bit of success at 24. And if I had $3,000 or $4,000 in the bank, maybe 5,000,
Yeah.
I felt like I was a king.
Yep.
And so I will say I applaud you. Keep doing what you're doing. You probably don't need advice from me.
That's great. Thanks for the question. Blood Phantom is a really awesome follower of the Independent Investor channel. So really appreciate that question. We're going on about 2 hours. I wanted to take advantage of this time. I would like to close it down at about the 2 hour mark, but I just want to take the opportunity to thank David again. David will continue to be a guest on the Independent Investor channel. That's the way it's going to be. I typically am looking for those opportunities to educate people, and I don't know if YouTube is necessarily the best platform for that. That's why a lot of channel creators now are looking to branch out, start their own websites, seek out that education niche through podcasting, through Instagram. To be quite honest with you, Twitter is kind of growing on me a little bit to foster some discussion. And we're bringing in a whole different genre of folks that are actually changing the YouTube landscape a little bit. And this is becoming one of those places where people can come and they can get a support mechanism. I look at the Friday live stream that I do as being just that. But I was really looking forward to this live stream. Real estate is one of those things I'm extremely interested in. And I'm extremely excited to have this opportunity, and I think it's going to benefit a lot of people, David. But I want you to share your channel as well as your other social media platforms as well, because I want to make sure that people, if they need to access you, that they can. And I know David makes himself very accessible, and kudos to David for doing that.
Okay, it's real easy. I have a YouTube channel at flippingacademy.com. It's a newer channel. Please subscribe to it because I'm trying to build it. And as Ryan can attest to, when you're at the stage that I'm at, it is painful. It's really, really hard to build it. I have like 740 subscribers or something, and every subscriber has been a lot of work. And so if you did get some value out of this, please subscribe to it. Tell somebody else about the channel, or watch a video and comment, or show some love somehow. I also have my podcast, and I actually love doing the podcast because I have a strong radio background, and you'll really notice that if you listen to my podcast.
That's true.
And the podcast is easy to find. It's at my name, which is davidoldenburg.com. If there's any confusion on spelling of David Oldenburg, it's on my channel at flippingacademy.com. And my social media links, both my Instagram and my Facebook, are in the description of every YouTube video that I have. So it's really, really easy to find me. And as Ryan said, I'm good about responding. If you leave a comment, probably because you'll be the only comment on my video. But if you leave a comment, I will definitely respond and help you out.
I'm one of those rare YouTube creators, and I think the sincerity piece that I mentioned earlier, I typically don't put a whole hell of a lot of value in subscriber count. I don't. I put a lot more value in information, and you bring it, Dave. You really do. I will foot stomp your radio voice on your podcast. The first time you listen to it, it's going to kind of blow you back a little bit because it's pretty impressive, and it is a lot of fun. But in all reality, I am looking for value, and this is an awful big topic to take on. This is, again, very, very difficult for a lot of first-time buyers, and I think by sitting and devoting some time to some self-education on this topic, just like on the investing topic, I think the two have very similar properties in that they are two of the rarest appreciating assets that you can get your hands on. But unfortunately, I think in both cases, it's two appreciating assets that a lot of people don't fully understand. And it is an evolving art. It is a discipline that I think people need to take a more proactive approach. And we're trying to do our small part on the Independent Investor channel. And I know David would attest to this as well. But with that, guys, I think we'll go ahead and sign off. We will conduct and pick up on our normal schedule on Friday, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I appreciate everybody kicking in here on a Saturday night. We value your time just like we value ours. And I think the trade-off was absolutely memorable, especially for me. So thank you again, David. I really appreciate it. We'll catch you on the flip side. Guys, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.